In this episode, we interview Alan Morris, who is the founder of the Carleton Project, which is an alternative school in northern Maine. Al's an old friend and a former teacher of both me and Jimmy. We discuss everything from guitars to education to the integration of blockchain into the education system. This is part one of a series. We hope you'll tune in. This one goes a little longer than usual, but it's got some really good content. So without further delay, here's Alan Morris. What do you got, old man?
Yeah. Is that like Stevie Ray Vaughan's older cousin or something?
Tell the cat. It's a Squire.
It's a 1980s Squire that I got for I got an amp and a guitar for $200.
No kidding.
Yeah, and it's nicer. They say the old ones, like the early copies, like early license. Squire used to make all the strings for Fender, right? And then they got a license to make guitars, and they could copy them. And in Korea, they could make better copies than they were making here. So these guitars are quite sought after. Of course, the guy I bought it from didn't know a thing about it. He's just trying to get rid of it. But yeah, this is nicer than a Fender that you buy now, right?
No kidding.
Yeah, and then I bought another one too because of COVID, right? Everybody's dumping guitars, and you know me, right? Like I'm a sucker for that. And I bought another one that was again a licensed under Squire, but it was more of a I guess I'd call it I think it's made in Malaysia. Anyways, it's like some of it's nice, but not all. Like the workmanship isn't there in the newer ones, like in the early ones, right?
Right.
So you can get them cheap, but you still have to fix them up.
Well, I remember back in the 90s, you were playing a Squire back then, right? A Korean-made Squire. You had one.
Yeah, well, I had a couple of Squires. I had a Strat for sure. Yeah, and the Strats were funny because they were, some of them were like really good quality, and then some of them were stupid, right? Awful, right? So, and it was just like you still paid $179 for it, and some of them were great, and some of them sucked, right?
Yeah.
I'll show you this real quickly. So this is the other one I bought.
Oh wow.
What's that one?
Can you see your face in the mirror, boy? Can you see your face?
Yeah.
Shiny. So it's kind of like the perfect mix between Les Paul and a Fender Telecaster. So it's set up like a Les Paul with super humbuckers, and a three-way switch on the top.
Yeah.
But it plays like a Fender.
So she's got some growl, but she's smooth.
That's right. Yeah. And this one is to buy it new, it's about $700. I got it for about $250 off a guy, and it just needs about $50 worth of fretwork, and it's it's a good guitar.
So that's a Squire too.
It is a Squire.
Right on.
How are you, boys? Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. I've been
like in Canada.
It's different here for sure. For instance, for me to travel right now to United States is not a problem because I'm an American. But of course, for me to return to New Brunswick, it doesn't matter who I am. I could be the Pope. There are restrictions upon return here. Right?
Can you tell folks a little bit about the school that you started and what it does?
Oh boy, yeah. Well, that's a long one. I think I'm still sorting that one out myself. It's kind of like a hobby gone awry, right? Because you were there.
Yeah.
But I think boy, I don't know. I think a lot of it has to do with really my whole life and my whole life experience. And I don't want to get into some long story about that. But for me, education didn't really work, and for a lot of people, it didn't work. And I think that when I say education, I mean traditional approaches don't work for every kid. I mean, every teacher knows that, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so great. What are you gonna do about it? Right? Is the next question. And of course, not much gets done about it, right? So that therein lies, the rub. I've heard a lot of people way smarter than me say that we know what it is that needs to be done, but the political will isn't there to do it, and something has to drive the change. And I think what I would say is that's for me. I already feel that. I'm 64 years old, and the people who are behind me are I don't know, they have a lot more energy than I do, and probably have a dog in the fight, which really I don't, right?
Mhm.
I'm at sort of at that point in my life where, people call on me for expertise, which I think is a friggin' riot, right? So, no, but, but that, that's okay. I have a lot to share, and I'm not opposed to sharing it. And clearly, what our school is about from day one has always been the same, and that's to meet sort of students where they are. Um, um, I think to try to try to help them find their passion, if you will, and to try to feed that passion, and from that passion grows something quite different, right? Than just sort of the standard approach to, whatever math, whatever the state, at whatever the state
Right.
requirement is, which is what a 4 English is, and however it is, right?
You-
And I think that's how we measure, right? We use that standard, their standard, to measure. Actually, I wrote a piece here just the other day, and I think one of the things that's always been hard for me is that we accept average, right? Like when we look at how we measure schools, and I'll speak for the state of Maine because I know more about it. So I'm not going to say I know everywhere that they do this, but states operate in very similar ways. And Maine is probably a little bit behind the 8 ball in many ways, but I think in Maine, we measure the success of our schools uh, based on how the students perform on standardized testing. So what you're doing is you're measuring the kids' performance to measure the performance of the school. I don't know. Like, to me, there's two completely different things going on under one roof. Like, if you know what's going to make a good school, my question is, how many times is the school doing that, right? Like, if you know that alternative approaches and let's say community-based learning and let's say internships and all these other things that are outside of school, that are, we all know, are equally valuable. How do the public schools measure that? And they don't have a way to do that, right? So, um, so, but that's what you're after. It's after we're after something more than the average. I've been to several school board meetings over the years where you hear the annual report of the superintendent, and it's like, we're 0.2% better than the Maine state average, and I'm thinking, an average, like what? The goal should be excellent, right? Not just from the students, but from the teachers. Like, that should be the goal, right? So I think we've tried to do that with Carleton, where we really center on the learner, on their passion. We support the strengths that they have. We encourage the self-esteem and the strengths that they have, and we get them to know themselves better, so that when a kid leaves Carleton Project, you're going to have your math and your English and your social studies, but you're going to get it in a very different way, so that it's going to stick with you. It's one thing I would say. But you're going to get something else. You're going to learn a few of the more important lessons, right? Like, well, you were there. You guys were all there. We called them basically the slurps, and the kids still do.
Yeah.
Like, it's their concepts that you work on, right? It's not just content learning. It's concepts. Like, if you one of my favorite ones is, like, one of the concepts you work on is leadership. And if you understand the concept of leadership, then you can apply that to millions of different situations, right? So for me, something like that is a concept that you have to learn, right? And you can demonstrate that.
You taught me a very important lesson about leadership, and I will so for those watching, Jim and I were both in Alan's program back in the 90s before it was the Carleton Project. We were actually in a public school setting. Both of us had difficulties with traditional learning, and when I got to Alan's program, you took me aside and you said that I had leadership skills, and I said I was impressed because nobody had ever said that to me. and I was kind of impressed with myself, and I was like, maybe I do have some leadership skills. And you said, yeah, and I should add that Hitler was a great leader too. And I was like, right. So, it's what are you doing, and are you doing the right thing?
That's right. Yeah, my brother Steven said when he heard Donald Trump say that he was a great planner, right? Steven says, so was Wile E. Coyote.
Best laid plans. So with education, did you have a chance to review any of the links that I sent you?
Oh, I did. And some of the stuff I know about, like I know about some of the schools who were trying to try to change the whole idea of what a transcript looks like or a transcript does. And you know some of that, right? Like remember on our transcripts, there was not just the basic stuff, but because a lot of kids came to our school, Carleton Project certainly, from other schools, we tracked where they learned what they learned. That was part of their transcript. If there were projects they did that were interest based, those were on there, and how they earned credit. If there were special projects in the community they did, that stuff was on there, right? And then when any time a credit was awarded, we had a place to give a comment, like, hey, this was really friggin' good, or Mark really showed a lot of promise here. And I think the most important thing, and I remember I ran across yours and sent it to you, your own self-evaluation, right, was part of your evaluation, right?
I still got mine too.
Right. And I think that's when I think about blockchain technology, and I hear people talking about like the value of all this stuff. Well, that's got a lot of value. Like that's important stuff. And it's data, right? And it's data that you control. So like, just to give you an example, like for right now, like say, Mark, you said, Alan, geez, I want to go to Orono. Oh, I better get my transcript from Alan. So you're going to have to call me at the school, and I'm going to have to find it, and I'm going to have to send it for you, and I'll send you a copy. And you have to trust that we're all going to do that. But it's your friggin' data. So I think that's where blockchain really begins to hand people back their own. Does that make sense to you guys?
So somebody's been doing his homework.
Well, I know some people that have done it, right? I know some people that are trying to pull this off, and there are some companies that are helping them. And that's typically what happens in education. It's just like cyber schools. Like those of you who got to participate in cyber schools, they were homegrown cyber school efforts, right? You know that because you were in on it. But most public schools buy some friggin' cyber school bullshit, and it'll be the same thing with be the same thing with this. Somebody will develop a system that they can buy rather than homegrown, but at least there'll be some similarities, right? It'll still be the same idea, and that's that there's you have your you have your data, and it's your data. And I think the other thing that I have to say about that is, we've certainly done that with our transcripts in what I would call a paper format, right? Where, we put that stuff on ours, and when our kids apply to go to college, they have that stuff on there, and colleges really appreciate it. But on the flip side of that, colleges are finding that the person who is in the top 3 in their high school with a 4.0, who they're going to take into their school and give a big fat, I would say, a big fat scholarship to, is not their best bet for the money. You see what I'm saying? And they're finding that out. So that transcript is not telling them the stuff that they need to know in order to make a good decision. So I see, once you start creating this sort of data, that's student-owned data, then I see universities being able to go find the students they're looking for. You see what I mean? Instead of taking a bunch of boneheads they don't want, right?
Branching off from what you were saying, like I did some digging around myself, and I didn't realize that like 1 in 6 medical degrees are fraudulent in the United States. Did you know
That's right. That's right.
1 in 6?
Yeah, 1 in 6. George Garland, a board of the member of the U.S.-based Council for Higher Education Accredited, told CNN that he estimates that more than 100,000 fake degrees are sold each year alone, just in the U.S. alone. And I just kind of want to get your your thoughts on it, Al. You
Well,
know,
I think if you own your data, you control your data. There's nothing there that isn't easily authenticated, correct?
yeah, yeah,
Right. So if anybody said, "Well, I don't believe that," uh, that's easy to find out that they did or they didn't. Data is data, right? It's not. It's either good data or bad data, I suppose. But if it's your data, it seems to me that a blockchain. I guess I don't know if I'm using the right term, but I'll say a blockchain diploma, right?
yeah,
Has is something you could build on as you continue to grow, right?
Mhm.
yeah,
uh, and some people would say that well, how do you value that thing? Well, for some people it's more valuable. Clearly, if your whole background is in music, Berkeley might be interested in yours and willing to pay for that information, but some community college is just not going to do that, right? So but either, you get what I'm saying, like it's an advantage for people looking for the right people too. But the biggest thing in that I see for education per se really comes to sort of the idea of different learning platforms. You guys both know this because you were the guinea pigs for Carleton Project. You were told, when you said, "What do I do?" I would say, "What? Well, what do you want to do?"
What do you
And
want to
you'd
do?
say, right? And you'd say, "Well, I need a bunch of credits." And I go, "Well, what credits do you need?" Like when you guys got out of school, you were in control of what you needed for credits. You knew what that was. You knew what you had to figure out. You had some ownership. You had some responsibility. That also adds value to that experience and the result of that experience, which is the blockchain, right?
I mean, I would say like the best learning happens on the periphery of interest, right?
Oh,
Like,
clearly. Yeah. Clearly.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's so a kid like my kid likes engineering, and he likes doing code, but I'm like, you need to learn how to type to do that. You need to know math to do that.
Right.
He's homeschooled, so thankfully we can do that kind of stuff. But
Well, another thing I would say about that, Mark, is typically, even let's just say your kid wanted to do an engineering internship. Typically, the way they're set up is that kid would have to make a substantial decision
yeah,
about doing that, rather than go do it for a couple of weeks and be able to walk out the door going, "Nah, it's not really what I thought it was." You know what I mean? Like, to expect that a kid early on would commit to a 15-week internship in something that they find interesting is,
right.
to me
Well, and it's
crazy.
so here's my other thing is that I think that COVID kicked the public education system in the guts. Like,
I know, I can tell you how it kicked. Yes, I can tell you definitely even how, right?
but and on some level, and I know I'll make people mad, not that anybody's going to be listening to this, but some people will. Um, I think it's a really good thing, because I think we need to start looking at things differently when it comes to education. Like the thing that I'm seeing with this, there are two things. One's really concerning to me. Number one, I wouldn't want, so when Jimmy and I were in school, people talked about our permanent record, and it didn't
Right.
exist in the 90s, right? And I don't, I, the thing that scares me is I think that kids should be able to opt into all, this blockchain educational transcript, or opt out if they don't want to do that. Like if my high school education followed me to today, I wouldn't be where I am. I did what I did in spite of my education that I received in a
Right.
general high school.
That's right.
So, there's that. But the other piece of this that really interests me is I think that number one, we've learned that distance learning or remote learning can happen, easier than it ever has in the past. But you take a guy like Jimmy, right? And Jimmy tells me that he was welding on the White House lawn like however long ago. And I was like, Jimmy, when did you learn how to weld? And Jimmy's answer was,
yeah, at work, through trial and
yeah,
error.
at work. So, maybe there can be something like LinkedIn or something like that you can opt into, where your, part of your yearly review with your company is that these things are added to who you are. Because I tried to go to college after high school, and it was really much of the same. You know what I mean? Like I just couldn't find, number one,
Oh
I didn't
yes,
know what I
no,
wanted to do.
no. I have a friend who did their PhD in education, and I'm not going to say who it was, not going to say where they did it, but I will say that for them, they found it. It was just a series of hoops to jump through with really a bunch of people who really didn't know half of what he knew, right?
Right.
So it made it
And
very frustrating. Yeah.
yeah, and I think, here's the other thing is, like, I took a college course like 5 years ago, and I was blown away that I had so much access on the internet to just go on and find out what the answer was to whatever it is I was researching, right? I didn't have to go to a library. I didn't have to jump through the hoops. I just had to go on Google and figure it out and be tenacious
Didn't even
enough.
have to get out of bed.
That's right. So if we can have a portfolio for every person that they can opt into, where Jim says, I know how to weld, I know how to do this or that, I have supervisory experience, whatever. And you can see what the track record is and what his ratings are, and he can build that portfolio on his own. I'm not sure.
I think the same format kind of spills over into like career centers and stuff like that eventually in time, and with like medical records and your education, and
That's
there's
right.
gonna be a plethora of different avenues. Some stuff that we haven't even touched on or even figured out yet.
Right, or even thought of, even thought of. As of course a musician, I see, of course, a lot of musicians having been through what they've been through in COVID. A couple things I would say haven't changed, and that's that the ones who work harder at being a musician have done okay. Like they're the ones who get up in the morning and go online and talk to their fans and do songs from their living room and keep their emails going and continue to be one. And then there are other musicians who like, oh, Jesus is too hard. I'm not playing anymore. And boys, I really love playing. And and they're back to waiting on tables. And I think the idea of a personal bent to anything you do, how you represent that is everything. And I've seen a lot of down and out musicians really work really, really hard to make something happen, right?
Yeah.
And those are the guys I can support.
Well, and to be able to have that interaction, right? Like I actually saw you and Johnny. There's somebody that you follow.
Oh, Johnny A.
Johnny A. And it's like you can interact with him and be like, hey, what about this? What about that? And he's answering you in real time. And it's like there's value in that.
Oh yeah, and that's been really fun because like you can see I can plug my guitar in with my headphones on and I can play along with him, and he doesn't even know I'm there playing along with him, right? So it's you can learn some licks from him, which I have done. He also has a PayPal account. And when I feel like he's really showed me something that like nobody else has ever showed me, I'll give him a donation, right?
Yeah.
And I'm gonna say, the guy did it. He's still doing it. So he's been doing it for a year and a half every morning, right? For an hour and a half, for a year and a half. And he has a group of steady followers who I think over time it's changed from kind of a light format to one that's a little more guitar heavy now. So we talk about guitars. We talk about, there's a market for that. People want to know about pedals and new gear and stuff like that. So, he's a working musician who knows all that stuff on a level that we understand, right? So to me, that's very interesting. I've known other musicians that have said, I'm going to take this time and learn how to play piano, and then I'm going to sing you a song. Well, that's great. However you get through it. But that's taken on a new skill to get through it, as opposed to building on some of the skills you already have. And I guess we all move forward in our own way. But that doesn't look like working hard because you're not out there every day. You're sitting at home at your piano and nobody's watching.
Right.
So I think something to be said for that. I think, but you're right. To tell the whole picture of a person is what's important, and I think that's what I can see is, a typical high school diploma is very limited, right?
Yeah.
And it compares you to your peers. Well, people are not that interested anymore in being compared to their peers. They want to look at the experience you've had, and they want to meet you, and they want to talk to you. And based on those things, and as we now know, they can meet you right here online and have a conversation with you, and make some determination then. So So yeah, I think for me, blockchain, like a lot of things, like I remember the first 9-watt bag phone that I had, at Mount Carleton with a Yagi on the end of a broomstick, right? And I'm thinking, we thought we were like high tech, right? To be
Yeah.
able to download something on the internet from the middle of nowhere, right?
That's actually a story that I tell a lot. So, and I'll tell it here is you and I, the first time that I ever experienced wireless internet, I think you can consider it wireless internet. You and I were in your Ford F-150 and we
Right.
had your bag phone and we plugged your laptop into your bag phone and it dialed into because it was dial up. So it dialed
Right.
into the number and went through the all that stuff. And then we were on the internet in a vehicle in probably 1998 or 99.
That's right. Yeah, we were.
Yeah.
Yeah, with
The
on a
first time I
broomstick.
experienced any kind of internet was with you, wired or not wired.
Yeah.
Was up
Yeah.
in that building,
Oh
Yeah.
yes, yeah. Oh well, and to be honest, we had one of the first cyber schools around, and where we were actually, kids who for Echo 2000 were homegrown online classes by the teachers of those schools, right? And we went to for 3 years in a row. We went to the Krista McAuliffe, I think, science fair. Me, Terry Depre, and Dave Lyon and Jerry White, who's still on our board.
Is
Uh,
he really?
yeah, and these guys were, you know, like big thinkers of their time, right? They're way ahead of their time in supporting, online learning, and people just didn't get it. They just didn't get it. Now everybody's doing it, right? The other thing is you talked about online or remote learning. So a thing I have to say about Carleton Project that's been very strange is that being a bit of a geek myself, the kids who come to work at Carleton come to school every day to Carleton Project where their computer is, and they get their computer and they log on, they go to work, right? And at the end of the day, they take their computer and they plug it in or put it in their locker or their cubby or wherever it was, and then they go home and they forget about it. Next morning they come in and they log in and do the same thing. So one thing that was very different for us is we're not really doing there's a difference between a remote emergency learning, and that's what public schools are doing, because that's always with the intention of going back to normal, which I think, like you said, will never happen. So that's a whole other dialogue, and we can have, but that's what everybody's hoping for, and that's what everybody's planning for. And no change for a lot of those people would be the best. Getting back to what they call normal, right? And I think those days are over. For a lot of reasons. One thing that I have seen is that people who can afford to pay for their education for their kids are simply doing it at this point. So that's one obstacle that their public schools are facing. Another one is the ability for them to try to stay relevant to the kind of learners that are out there. When you have a system that rewards the older, experienced teachers and limits the opportunity for newer teachers who have what I would say probably good automatic online skills.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a friend of mine who teaches at a school who I will not say anything about, but she's a good veteran teacher in a public school setting. She's perfect. But charge her with doing the same thing online, and she simply does not have the skill set. So then the question remains, is there room for a place like that? And yes, there is. Because here's a person who continued to do lectures. They could continue to do that. And there are some students who might opt for that way to do it. They would prefer to sit in on a lecture and do the work. Either way, it will be delivered online and can be delivered online. So that's a change that's happening now. I'll give you an example. We're looking to hire teachers for the fall. And what we're looking at, we haven't run an ad yet, but I think what we're looking at or talking about seriously is finding this very group of teachers who are younger. Online is second nature to them. They've already been certified. They can't get their foot in the door in a public school, and they want to learn how to work with this population of kids. And I think we can help them be an effective online teacher, which is not the same as remote online learning. You see what I mean? Very
Yeah.
different. So our kids, the only difference for us at our school is that they weren't coming to school every day, where our sense of community is built, right? That's, that's where it happens. And so that is one thing that we gave up. Now, a couple things I could say were very interesting about it. And one of them was that we did make the transition just like we are here now, where I'm talking to them in their homes, really. And that was really interesting because the masks are now off. I mean, when we started at first, they're sitting in the classroom and they all have a mask on and they're talking, but you can't tell who's talking. And so then we got a better microphone, and then they would pass it around, and that was okay, but still you couldn't always tell who was talking. And so we upgraded the equipment, but the real eye opener was when we went to the real eye opener was when these kids tuned in from their own home on their own device, in a manner in which they were accustomed to tuning in with their own friends at home on a device.
Participation goes up.
Absolutely. And not only did participation go up, you get to see what's going on in their house, right? And I don't mean that in a snoopy, weird way, but you get a sense of what's going on with them rather than just, them trying to hold their shit together when they come to school when the whole world could be falling apart, right? So it's a whole different thing.
Well, I think that also, like, it takes away a couple steps, right? Like for me, getting up in the morning, getting myself breakfast, whatever that looked like, and then like stumbling to school, like that was the hardest part of my day. So
That's
like
right.
if I could like, comb my hair so it looked like I washed it, and like pop on a computer and be like, maybe in my underwear from here down, but I'm comfortable,
Right. But here we go. This is like what my the research says. We have all this research now. There's science involved, right? And the research says that really adolescents don't do very well in the morning. Like,
Yeah.
they like to sleep till 10 o'clock. But the research also shows that they're willing to work till 11 o'clock at night, and given the support and the set of paintbrushes, the guitar, whatever it is they need to keep the going, they're willing to go all day. So, and I think that's where traditional education breaks down. We have to remember, teachers' unions are unions. A union for its employees is trying to get more money for really less work and less responsibility. That's what they do, right? And a teacher is an employee. Now, do school departments want good teachers, or do they want good employees? They have to ask that question, and that's the question that's going to change public education. It's like I was saying when we first started. There's average, and what are the changes that we need to make in public ed to recognize that average just simply is not good enough, right? I mean, average is the option that's available to everybody, is the way I like to put it, right? But what about the people who have much more to offer and want much more to offer? How do you do that? And the answer, of course, is to give them control of their own data, right? And that's, of course, what blockchain technology does. However it's used, you're creating your own reality that's verifiable, right? Secure, right? And does it have value? Yeah, it really does, right? Universities are going to be very interested in being able to mine the people that they want to come to their school. That makes perfectly good sense to me, and vice versa, right? Students being able to mine for for the kind of school they're looking for. So yeah, I think when you take that out of the hands of public school officials, who do have, as a lot of power and control over how that happens, that doesn't bode well for public education.